What if everything you have been told about aging after 60 is incomplete? What if the fatigue, the stubborn abdominal weight, the slower recovery are not simply the price of getting older, but the result of three biological systems quietly shutting down at the same time? Most people over 60 believe that once energy declines, it never truly comes back. That once visceral fat accumulates, it becomes permanent. That cellular repair simply fades with time. But what if those assumptions are wrong? After 60, subtle changes begin to compound. Energy feels less stable, muscle responds more slowly, the waistline expands despite familiar habits. These shifts appear gradual, almost expected, so they are rarely questioned. Yet beneath these surface changes, deeper biological patterns are unfolding. Inside your cells, energy production becomes less efficient. The systems responsible for repairing tissue begin losing resilience. Metabolism gradually favors glucose dependency and fat storage over flexibility and balance. What makes this more concerning is not that these systems decline, but that they decline together, reinforcing one another in a quiet biological loop. My name is Dr. Javier Morales. For more than 20 years, I have studied metabolic medicine and the biology of aging in adults over 50. What changed my perspective was realizing that aging is not only about time, it is about signaling, especially the metabolic signals created in the first hours after waking. In the next few minutes, I will explain what is actually happening inside your body after 60. Then we will explore 7 biological mechanisms influenced by one specific morning intervention. Finally, I will show you exactly how to apply it safely and realistically. Before we talk about changing the trajectory, however, we must first understand the biology driving it. Before we talk about changing the trajectory of aging, we need to understand what is actually shifting beneath the surface. After 63, biological systems begin accelerating in the wrong direction at the same time. The first is mitochondrial decline. Mitochondria are the structures inside your cells responsible for producing energy. When you were younger, your cells contained a dense network of these energy generators operating efficiently. As the decades pass, both the number and performance of these mitochondria decrease. The result is not dramatic overnight collapse, it is subtle reduction. Tasks that once felt effortless begin requiring more effort. Recovery from physical activity slows. Mental clarity fluctuates. Your cells are simply producing less usable energy. The second shift involves your internal repair system. Throughout your life, specialized regenerative cells have helped maintain tissue integrity. They repair small tears in muscle. They support blood vessel health. They help replace damaged cells. With age, the pool of these regenerative cells diminishes, and the remaining ones become less resilient. The body still repairs itself, but the efficiency declines. Minor damage accumulates more easily. Inflammation lingers longer. The third process is metabolic drift toward glucose dependency. Over time, insulin sensitivity decreases. Your cells become less efficient at burning stored fat for fuel. Instead, they rely more heavily on circulating glucose. This pattern encourages fat accumulation, particularly around the abdominal organs, and promotes low-grade systemic inflammation. Individually, each of these changes is manageable. Together, they create amplification. Reduced energy production weakens repair. Weakened repair allows cellular stress to accumulate. Metabolic dysfunction increases oxidative strain and further burdens energy systems. The cycle feeds itself quietly for years. This is why many people over 60 feel that decline accelerates rather than progresses steadily. It is not one system failing, it is multiple systems interacting. So the critical question becomes this: is there a single intervention capable of influencing energy production, repair capacity, and metabolic direction at the same time? To answer that, we first need to look at how fuel selection inside your body determines everything that follows. The first mechanism begins with fuel selection. After 60, many bodies lose what scientists call metabolic flexibility. When you were younger, your cells could switch smoothly between burning glucose and burning fat depending on availability. Over time, that flexibility narrows. Glucose becomes the dominant fuel and fat oxidation slows. This matters because glucose is a fast energy source, but it keeps insulin elevated. When insulin remains elevated, fat burning is suppressed. Stored fat, particularly visceral fat, becomes harder to access. This is where C8 medium-chain triglyceride oil changes the equation. Unlike most dietary fats, C8 is rapidly transported to the liver and converted into ketones, primarily beta-hydroxybutyrate. Ketones are not foreign to your body. You naturally produce them during fasting. They serve as an alternative fuel that your brain, heart, and muscles can use efficiently. By introducing ketones in the morning, you reintroduce a second fuel system. Your cells are no longer forced to rely exclusively on glucose. Insulin levels remain lower. Fat oxidation pathways activate. This restores metabolic flexibility, the foundation for the mechanisms that follow. The second mechanism builds on this shift: visceral fat. The fat stored around the liver, pancreas, and intestines behaves differently from the fat beneath the skin. It is hormonally active. It releases inflammatory signals. It responds strongly to insulin levels. When ketone production rises and insulin remains low, specific fat-burning pathways become more active. The body begins mobilizing stored fat more efficiently, particularly from metabolically active regions such as the abdomen. This is not about rapid weight loss. It is about targeted fat utilization driven by hormonal signaling. As metabolic flexibility improves and visceral fat begins to decline, inflammation decreases and insulin sensitivity improves. That improved insulin sensitivity further enhances fat burning, creating a positive biological loop instead of a negative one. Fuel choice sets direction, and once the direction shifts, deeper systems inside the cell begin responding, including the structures responsible for producing energy itself. As fuel flexibility improves and ketone levels rise deeper, changes begin taking place inside the cell, particularly within the mitochondria. Mitochondria are often described as the energy generators of the cell, but that description does not fully capture their importance. They are not just energy producers, they are regulators of cellular resilience. When mitochondrial density declines, cells do not merely feel weaker, they become more vulnerable to stress. After 60, both the number and efficiency of mitochondria tend to decrease. This contributes to fatigue, slower recovery, and reduced endurance. For many years, this decline was considered largely irreversible. However, ketones influence signaling pathways linked to mitochondrial biogenesis, the process of building new mitochondria. One of the key regulators involved in this process is a protein often referred to as a master controller of energy adaptation. When activated, it signals cells to produce additional mitochondria and improve the efficiency of existing ones. As ketone levels increase, this signaling pathway becomes more active. Over time, cells can increase their capacity to generate energy from fat and ketones. This is not an overnight transformation. It is gradual adaptation. But when energy production improves, fatigue decreases and physical performance becomes more stable. The fourth mechanism extends beyond energy into repair capacity. Throughout adulthood, regenerative cells help maintain tissue integrity. With aging, many of these cells become less resilient and more prone to exhaustion. One of the challenges is maintaining them in a protected resting state until they are needed for repair. Beta-hydroxybutyrate, the primary ketone produced from C8 oil, functions not only as fuel but also as a signaling molecule. It interacts with gene expression pathways that influence cellular stress resistance. When ketone levels are present at mild nutritional levels, certain protective pathways are upregulated. This helps preserve regenerative capacity rather than allowing premature depletion. In simple terms, ketones do more than provide energy. They help create an internal environment that supports both energy production and cellular preservation. As mitochondria strengthen and repair systems stabilize, another critical question emerges: how does this altered metabolic environment affect abnormal cellular growth? That leads us to the fifth mechanism. To understand the fifth mechanism, we need to briefly revisit a discovery made nearly a century ago. In 1931, biochemist Otto Warburg observed something unusual about rapidly dividing abnormal cells. He found that they rely heavily on glucose for energy, even in the presence of oxygen. This metabolic preference, now known as the Warburg effect, revealed that not all cells use fuel in the same way. Healthy cells, when functioning properly, are metabolically flexible. They can generate energy from glucose fat or ketones depending on availability. Abnormal cells, however, often display reduced mitochondrial efficiency and a stronger dependence on glucose fermentation. This distinction matters. When your metabolism is dominated by glucose dependency and insulin levels remain chronically elevated, you create an internal environment rich in the very fuel that certain abnormal cells prefer. Introducing ketones through C8 MCT oil does not treat or cure anything. It does something more foundational. It shifts the metabolic terrain. As ketone availability increases and insulin levels remain lower, healthy cells can adapt efficiently because their mitochondria are capable of oxidizing ketones. Cells that depend primarily on glucose have less flexibility under those conditions. In addition, mild nutritional ketosis has been associated with reductions in inflammatory signaling and improvements in insulin sensitivity. Both factors are relevant because chronic inflammation and high circulating insulin are linked to long-term cellular stress. The key point is not that ketones eliminate abnormal cells. The key point is that fuel environment influences cellular behavior. When the internal terrain becomes less dominated by glucose and more supported by efficient mitochondrial function, the biological direction shifts. This is about creating a metabolic environment that favors resilient cells. And when resilience improves, the next major concern after 60 muscle preservation becomes significantly easier to address. After 60 muscle loss becomes one of the most underestimated risks of aging. It is not only about strength or appearance. Muscle tissue plays a central role in metabolic stability, immune resilience, and long-term independence. As muscle mass declines, resting metabolic rate falls. Blood sugar regulation becomes less stable. Recovery from illness becomes slower. This process, often referred to as age-related muscle decline, accelerates when calorie intake is reduced without proper metabolic signaling. Here is where ketone production influences the equation. When beta-hydroxybutyrate levels rise, the body interprets this as a signal that energy is available. Under these conditions, the breakdown of muscle tissue for glucose production becomes less necessary. In simple terms, ketones exert an anti-catabolic influence. They reduce the pressure to sacrifice muscle during periods of reduced caloric intake. In addition, ketone presence interacts with signaling pathways involved in muscle protein synthesis. One of the most important of these pathways regulates cellular growth and repair. When appropriately stimulated, especially in combination with resistance training and adequate protein intake, this pathway supports muscle preservation even during fat loss. This creates a powerful shift. Instead of losing both fat and muscle together, the body becomes more capable of preferential fat reduction while maintaining lean tissue. The seventh mechanism concerns timing. After an overnight fast, insulin levels are naturally at their lowest point of the day. This creates a temporary metabolic window where fat oxidation pathways are more active and cellular energy sensors are more responsive. Introducing C8 MCT oil during this period amplifies ketone production at precisely the moment when the body is most prepared to utilize it. This early morning window enhances insulin sensitivity, supports fat mobilization, and strengthens the signaling pathways involved in cellular repair and mitochondrial adaptation. Timing does not create the mechanism, but it magnifies it. When fuel selection, mitochondrial signaling, muscle preservation, and hormonal timing align, the biological trajectory after 60 can begin shifting in a different direction. Now that we understand the mechanisms, the next question becomes practical. How do you implement this safely and effectively? Understanding the biology is important, but implementation determines results. The first priority is choosing the correct type of MCT oil. Not all products are equal. Look for a formula that is primarily C8, sometimes labeled as caprylic acid, or a blend of C8 and C10. Avoid products dominated by lauric acid, which behaves more like a long-chain fat and produces significantly fewer ketones. Second is dosing. Begin conservatively. Start with 1 teaspoon in the morning. Maintain this for several days to allow your digestive system to adapt. If well tolerated, gradually increase to 1 tablespoon. Most individuals experience optimal benefits between 1 and 2 tablespoons daily. Increasing too quickly may cause digestive discomfort, which is avoidable with gradual adjustment. Third is preparation. Simply pouring oil into coffee and stirring is not sufficient. Proper emulsification improves tolerance and consistency. Blend the oil into hot coffee for 15 to 20 seconds until the texture becomes smooth and uniform. This enhances absorption and reduces gastrointestinal stress. Timing is equally critical. Consume it within the first hour after waking before eating. Then allow a 2 to 4 hour window before your first meal if possible. This preserves the low insulin state established overnight and maximizes fat oxidation and ketone utilization. Pair this protocol with light resistance training 2 to 3 times per week and adequate protein intake. This reinforces muscle preservation signaling and supports metabolic adaptation. In the first 2 weeks, expect improved morning clarity and reduced hunger. Between weeks 3 and 8, gradual abdominal fat reduction may become noticeable. By 2 to 3 months, many people report more stable energy and improved metabolic markers. This is not an overnight transformation, it is a directional shift created by consistency. And that direction becomes powerful over time. After 60, the story most people are told is simple decline is inevitable. Energy fades, muscle thins, abdominal fat accumulates, repair slows, and over time these changes feel permanent. But what we have discussed today is something different. We examined how mitochondrial decline, reduced regenerative capacity, and metabolic glucose dependency begin reinforcing one another. Then we walk through 7 biological mechanisms, showing how shifting fuel selection in the morning can influence energy production, fat utilization, cellular resilience, muscle preservation, and hormonal timing. This is not magic, it is signaling. In my clinical experience and years studying metabolic biology, the most powerful interventions are rarely dramatic. They are consistent. Small daily signals repeated over time reshape physiology in ways that seem subtle at first and profound later. That said, this is not a cure. It is not a replacement for medical care. It is not a guarantee of disease prevention. Individual biology varies. If you have liver disease, diabetes requiring medication, or other medical conditions, you should speak with your physician before making significant dietary changes. The purpose of this discussion is educational. It is to help you understand how cellular fuel influences aging biology. Aging is not just the passing of years, it is the direction of your metabolism, and direction can change. Start small, stay consistent, observe how your body responds. Because after 60, the most important shift is not external, it is internal.